we thank you for your word, which instructs us in things about you, which is helpful for sure, because in our own mind, we can create a lot of what we think you should be or ought to be, and yet your word corrects those things. And so we thank you for that truth. May it continue to guide us, especially as we think about all you're doing behind the scenes and what you've done in history. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen. So we are getting back on our NCRL study, which is great. It's been a couple weeks. Session 22. Man, I don't think we're going to beat Screwtape. Screwtape had like 64. Well, no, 60. So 61. So, but we're still making our way, which is good. And what we've been seeing is the well, you guys, where are we at? To help me as a teacher, I've been talking all day. Well, what do you remember? Where are we at? Well, where we've been and where we're going? Oh,
Like now, like from the start till now. So it's the unseen realm, and it is organized. Hockey. There are both good and evil beings, and they interact with the human realm as well. And they also had little side trails into that he God has taken to he's quit away.
okay. Oh, yeah. He's distanced himself.
Yeah, and territorial stuff.
That's good. Territorial. Yep. Mike, add something.
Was greater evil than we know. That's taking place.
Yes.
In both physical world and the spiritual realm. So there is infallible.
Yep. One of the you bring it up, which is good. One of the questions that we are answering, similar to what we've talked about in the Second Temple period, the time of Jesus, was why is the world as bad as it is? And oftentimes we will say, well, Satan, that's helpful. We might say Adam and Eve sinned, and that's for sure. But we've also seen that there's been a tremendous amount of evil in the world from this union of fallen angels and human women producing Nephilim, Genesis 6. And then that's biblical. And then in the book of Enoch was the idea of the spirits of those beings after they died in the flood or afterwards, that their spirits became the demons that we see in the New Testament, as well as, in the Gospels, as well as the rest of the New Testament. And there's no doubt that demons are extremely active today. And there's a lot of them. And there's doctrines, there's teachings of demons, there's, as Emma said, there's territorial spirits. Ephesians 6, that's we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and spiritual hosts of wickedness. So the world is in has a lot of evil in it because of this angelic realm. Some of them in party from God and rebelling and causing a lot of havoc in our realm. Okay, and God has allowed that. And most importantly, not most importantly, but certainly importantly, they have become God's enemies. And God is out not just to win us back so that we can fulfill our destiny of being his vice regents on earth in our realm, the physical realm, but he's also going to conquer and eliminate all of those spiritual enemies that have come against it. And it's not done yet. We still have, it's kind of like their fate has been sealed by Jesus' death on the cross, filled out from Colossians 2:15, that they have been disarmed for us. As believers, as we were learning, we're God's kids, and God has protected us. He's put a hedge of protection, not only around us, but think about this. I like to think in terms of, does God give protection to unbelievers from the fallen spiritual evil angels?
Yes.
How so?
Absolutely. He doesn't just allow them to just puppet them. Not all of them. Some of them are taken over.
Yep. Possessed.
what if you talk about drug use, like drug-induced psychosis is what you hear that term. You would think then people who primarily have idols, right, that possess them, then God allows, or that there could be a whatever. Yeah, basically that. So there's some kind of accountability for them for how they behave.
I think in terms of like Satan, I think in terms of Satan and Job of all time. That's just Satan has real power, right? To go and to create on Job boils. I mean, that's real. He's manipulating, his skin to become full of boils and very painful. Could Satan do that to anybody and everybody? Sure, he could. But so even the fact that he doesn't or can't is because God has put limits on it, and all the demonic realm in the fallen angelic realm. So even unbelievers, they owe God a great deal of gratitude that God has protected them mostly from a lot of that attention. Now, granted, he does allow demons to do certain things, and all within his sovereign power. All what we're saying is that Satan and the fallen angels and the demons all have limits, and so that's very gracious of God to do, especially for people that hate him, and these people hate God. Okay,
So just real quick, wrath of abandonment would be a point where basically Satan is given war territory. Is that how you read it?
yeah, oh yeah, God could say like we look at the world and whether America is going to go sharp down or we're going down. We know we're going down, whether it's going to be a quick drop or we've seen it go like this. But as we have abandoned God, just as a culture, God is abandoning us. That's Romans chapter 1. And so you have that distancing, that abandoning, and as he does, he just removes his restraint. And eventually when the rapture happens and the church is removed, we are the salt and light of the world, right? Jesus said that. And imagine all that prayer, all that light, all that truth being gone. I mean, that's you see the big risk of the entire tribulation end time scenario is deception. And imagine us, the church all around the world, being promoters of God's holy truth, just being, I mean, how do you have any discernment after that? You don't. And that's why the risk of deception is so great once the church is removed. And that's a whole other topic, but yeah.
I'm not trying to prolong this entry, or your interrupt today, but overall, there sits the question, why?
Why what?
The separation, wrath of abandonment. Now, we have a thing in course that's taking place that we can see on a timeline. We're coming up to the last great rebellion, right?
Yep.
Things as such. And then why? And why has the course of things been given such a length of time, at least in our eyes? Why has the course of things...
You mean like from God? Why has God missed this?
Yeah, we're talking about this thing going on in the spiritual gospel. God abandons, Satan gets more territory, Satan knows his end, so on and so forth. Yahweh, creator, the only uncreated God, all right? And does it just boil down to his sovereignty overall, that it's his creation and there's indifference in it than he would have had? What's the why? And he's going to see it come to fruition.
I think
creating a new realm, so to speak.
Well, what those are good questions as it relates to the specifics of God's mind. All we know generally, for example, well, why? Well, God's glory. He's looking to glorify himself. That's true. He's looking to, by glorifying himself, he's looking to exhibit his characteristics, his holiness, as well as his mercy, the soft and hard attributes. Secondly, we know from 2 Peter 3 that he's waiting because of his patience, so that he's not willing that any should perish, right? We discussed that. I think another angle, too, is that God, even in the tribulation, as he allows Satan to finally get his worship. I mean, you just look at the word worship in the book of Revelation, and most of the worship in the book of Revelation is equal between Satan and the dragon and the beast and God, right? And so God is going to allow the world to make a final choice, and they're going to choose to worship the dragon. So God allows that. And I think even as we get into the kingdom, 1,000-year reign, Jesus rules with the rod of iron, and you picture and you go, God hasn't God will not, even during the kingdom, there's still going to be sin there. He hasn't stamped out sin forever yet. And you think, well, why? Well, I think he allows it to show the sinfulness of sin. That even with Satan removed and all the demons and any sort of unseen realm influence, the sin of the human heart is still there and wicked. And God says, I'm doing this to show you the sinfulness of sin, that we don't even need Satan around. It's just there. That's what sin does. And that's a good segue. So that he does that, and then it's not until he creates a new heaven and new earth after the millennium when it's forever removed, never to be shown again. But let's segue right into this question that I have at the top of your sheet there. What theology can we learn from the event of the worldwide flood? And so here, Genesis 6:5, Genesis 6:1-4 is about the sons of God, the angels coming down with women, and then he goes right into this. And the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. The Lord said, I will blot out man whom I've created from the face of the land, from man to animals, to creeping things, and to the birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I've made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And these are the records of Noah. He's blameless, righteous man in his time. And then Genesis 6:17, behold, I, even I, am bringing a flood of water upon the earth to destroy all flesh, which is the breath of life from under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall perish, but I will establish my covenant with you, he's talking to Noah. And you shall enter the ark, you and your sons, and your wives, and your sons' wives. So we also know that in Genesis 8:21, which is after the flood is over now, we're told again that man is wicked even from his youth. So when you see that right there in the beginning, this is like a theme of the whole Bible in one sense, that sin has entered this world through Adam and Eve's choice, and it has caused a lot of trouble. And of course, us as being their descendants, that sin just continues to destroy. It continues to be an offense against the holy God. So let's, just a question, what theology? So I've given 7 things. You can add some others. The Lord sees the wickedness of man, even from their youth. Again, we know that you don't have to teach babies to be selfish, to lie, to cry and whine, and to say, I want, and also not to like the word no. Okay? They hate the word no, and they fight, and, if they had power, they would probably kill us. If they had the strength because they didn't get what they want, they really would. Thankfully, that lack of, sentiousness, I guess, if you want to say it that way, or they're growing in their understanding as the babies do, but as they get older, they start talking. But it's great that they start powerless, because otherwise they would just lash out. We also, theology, God demonstrates sorrow and regret at mankind's choice. He is sorry. He's sorry for what we're doing to ourselves and for how we've offended him, for sure. God is holy and will punish sinners. God is also gracious, and he provides a way of salvation for Noah and his family. I find it interesting here that even before God says to Noah, hey, I've provided the ark for you, and I want you to enter the ark, your family. And what we do know is that in 2 Peter chapter 2, Noah is called a proclaimer of righteousness, or a preacher of righteousness. And we also know that it was 120 years that the ark was being built, or at least from the time, it's like Genesis 6 right after this, 6:10 and going on, that God would allow this time frame. But we also know that Noah had no fruit. It was him and his family. That was it. And so all these people, after the door was shut, it was shut for 7 days before the rain started. And even God says here, hey, you guys are going to basically be the only ones that enter the ark, and no one else is going to listen. Number 5 there, sin affects not just mankind, but it also brings judgment on mankind's home, right? The curse. The curse enters our world. Death enters our world, Romans 5:12. We have a variety of consequences of judgments, hurricanes, earthquakes, all the fallen things in our world, in our universe. Some people will see this as the laws of entropy beginning, where things are decaying. They're going from order to chaos constantly. That whenever there's a transaction take place in physics, there's always a loss versus having it being continue. Number 6. This is where I'm going right here. The judgment of the flood was not only on adult males. Would we all agree? But women, children, and infants? Do we believe any babies died in the flood? Right? So it's what I wanted to talk about today was we're gonna see a little bit of a theological application about God is often accused in the Old Testament of genocide, right? When he says, I want you to go kill every man, woman, child, anything that breathes. I want you to, this particular community, kill it. Well, I think, why would you start in, Deuteronomy about genocide? Let's go back to the flood. The flood is a bigger genocide, isn't it? Yeah. And so what happens is oftentimes Christians are put on the defense in trying to defend these passages as it relates to genocide. And we often, I'll watch, theologians that they'll hem and haw, and like, this is politically incorrect. I mean, how do I answer this? This is pretty serious. And then we go through all these reasons about how it really might not mean exactly what it means. And we'll talk about some of that too. There are some nuances here that are important. But in reality, we just need to skip through all that and say, well, let's just skip those nuances of Deuteronomy and the tribes that are in, like, Jericho. God said, I want you to wipe everything out in Jericho. But that's the city. Let's go back to the flood. And now we have a bigger problem. How do we answer the flood, where certainly millions, if not potentially billions of people were wiped out, women, children, babies,
Everything.
everything, even animals. That's what we said. Even the consequence of man's sin affected the animals in the sense of them getting killed off. And granted, God, just again, he's gracious to the animal kingdom as well by allowing 2 of each kind to come on the ark. Well, number 7, God was righteous and holy to bring judgment on all ages of mankind. So, I just have 7 things here, but is there any other theology that we can gain just by the episode of the flood itself?
I think it goes with the mercy one, but that theme of salvation.
Okay, yep.
And Moses, or not Moses, but Noah, he was,
She said righteous and blameless in his time, and he walked with God, but he was still a sinner.
Still a sinner.
And so, but God provided the will.
Through sinners, right? Jesus was going to be born of a sinful woman. We apologize to the Catholic Church, for their theology of Mary being immaculate conceived, but Mary was a sinner. She acknowledged that in Luke chapter 1. God, my savior. Sinners don't need saviors, or sinners need saviors. Sinless people don't. So she acknowledged God was her savior. So
There's something about his patience too, in the sense that if you've ever had a crate of tomatoes have gone bad, but there's a few good ones. So you start picking through the good ones, and all of a sudden you toss the whole thing. That is showing that I think they're amazing to think that his care and concern for mankind and his creation was such that he didn't throw us all out.
no, let's remember.
My option.
So God would have been right to annihilate everybody.
Yeah.
And he just walked away and said, well, that was an interesting experiment. And the angels, Michael's watching and saying, well, Lord, yeah, they really rebelled. You gave them choice, and man, they certainly rebelled against you. And now we have the other angels. Yeah, I'm going to take care of them too. But let's just start it all over. But what we recognize too is the theology that was mankind's sinfulness part of God's overall plan.
Yeah.
It has to be. There is no plan B. So, and when we were going through the teaching on election, what we recognized just looking at all the data of the Bible was that God's perfect world, or for the goals that he had, okay, God didn't have different goals. For the goals that he had of us seeing not only his hard attributes, but his soft attributes, this was the perfect world that he created in order to accomplish those goals. Now, if he didn't want to demonstrate his mercy or forgiveness, that part of his nature, he would have said, well, I'm just going to create a perfect world. Could he have created a perfect world with no rebellion? Yes. But we would have never had the opportunity to be experiencing his forgiveness because there would have been nothing to forgive. So we recognize logically that this is the perfect world to accomplish those goals. It's not the perfect world in the sense that we're looking around, but to accomplish his goals, yes. And God chose to include sin and his victory over it, which is where we're at in Revelation 21 to 22.
I think one thing you're telling us too is we can't comprehend really what sin is, not forgotten.
Not to him.
We can't.
No, not yet.
We get it in the written word,
One day, when we're fully sanctified,
You said they're totally powerless. Well, they're totally powerless unto themselves until they start getting education. They're born, Yeah.
we have the knowledge of good and evil now, right? But there was a time when we didn't.
Here's the one thing that kind of my question. He wasn't sorry about the creation when Adam and Eve did what they did in the garden, right? He's birds with anger. So, in essence, what you're telling me here is you come along with the ark and the flood, and he's sorry for what he did, he says, I'm sorry for what he had burned with anger, but he was sorry for what had happened.
There's no anger. You don't see anger in Genesis 3. You don't see anger. The word anger doesn't appear.
But he's not sorry. He doesn't say, you don't see the term hate.
Yeah, in Genesis 3, we don't see that he's sorry. He just responds and says, well, I warned you. Now you're out of the garden. But it's interesting how he does it. You don't see a response of anger. Even though God's angry when
everybody's a little heavy duty.
right. But I'm just saying the text doesn't allow us to prove that. All we have is that he had regret. Go ahead.
Was the flood a lesson plan for mankind?
That's a big question.
For sure. How do we know that? How do we know that the flood is a lesson or a warning or a...
Well, you consider it down. Already by faith come out the other side.
For sure? What else? We have some good proof.
Didn't Jesus talk about it?
Jesus talked about the flood for sure. And he used it as an object lesson. We have 2 Peter chapter 2 talking, hey, in that context, he's saying, hey guys, don't be involved with the false teachers because they're going to get judged. Well, how do you know that? Because if he didn't spare the ancient world, right? Peter brings up the fact that he uses the flood as an object lesson of God's righteous judgment on wicked sinners. And he uses God's destruction of the entire ancient world as an example that every sin will be accounted for. So definitely is an object lesson, for sure. We see it in Jesus. We see it in the New Testament, pointing back, saying, if God did it then, he's gonna do it to these false teachers as well as the angels who sinned and other.
Isn't it an essential litmus test in regards to the mockers who deny the flood?
Litmus test of what?
Well, once again, essential doctrine.
So you're saying if you don't believe the flood is literal, I'm going to go to hell?
Well, I guess I didn't really frame it that extreme. But
No, that could always.
it's an important one, but I guess
Well, you see, essential.
put it in that context.
Yes.
No.
Is it an important doctrine? Yes. Is it essential for salvation? No. There's very few things that are essential for salvation. Yeah. Doesn't mean it's not extremely important, and it has a lot of ramifications. Because I would say, what verse do we have to prove that, God says, sorry, you didn't believe in the worldwide flood or a lower flood. Sorry, you're out. But that's leaving Jesus too bad. You're out. You didn't follow the line.
I was playing that little pull sake.
That's fine. No, that's fine. But
Since he's not here.
unfortunately, by saying it's not essential, some people say, oh, it's not important. No, I didn't say that. Extremely important at what it teaches us about God. And that's why I just have here 7 things. We could probably add another 20 about the theology of what we learned from just the episode of the flood itself. The main thing I'm after is that as Christians, we need to hold the high ground, and we need to not apologize for God. And we say, oh, so you believe in a God that would kill babies? Absolutely I do. I don't apologize for that. God didn't apologize. I mean, there's a lot of babies that died in the flood. Now, granted, we might need to come back and wrestle with some theology about how that's, in our puny little minds, about how that's justified. But if God wants to go and kill all the babies, somehow, some way, they have sin. The wages of sin is death. And if they're able to die, and we talked about this in the election series, but if a baby dies wherever, by man's hand or not, or in a flood or in an earthquake, whatever, their sin has been accounted to their account somehow. And that's where we talk about the doctrine of original sin. The original sin is not so much talking about Adam and Eve's original sin. That's not what the doctrine of theology of original sin. Original sin is talking about the guilt that Adam's and Eve's sin, it's true, the guilt has been put on all of their descendants. So that if a baby dies because of the guilt of their great-granddad, Adam, and they're held accountable to it. Well, that seems unfair. Well, it's called federalism.
But you could also argue that because of Adam's sin and us having inherited that sinful nature from Adam, by human nature we are sinful, but all have sinned. So it doesn't matter. If you are a human being in this time, you will sin.
Yep.
Top period, end of sentence.
Yep.
So
Those are the two things. We inherit the guilt of Adam, and therefore are worthy of death as soon as we're conceived. But secondly, we also inherit the sin nature of great-granddad Adam, and we are going to be born in a sinful state. So as we grow, we're automatically preconditioned to sin. Babies aren't born innocents, right? That if that's the case, there'd be at least one other perfect being in the history of mankind rather than Jesus. But we know every single person is preconditioned with a sinful nature, and they will sin. Well, that seems unfair. Well, that's, again, they are inheriting the sinful nature and the guilt. Now, before we cry foul, because that seems really unfair. Well, 1 second. Keep your thought. That seems really unfair. Well, if we go too far on that, then if you're a Christian, you're receiving all the benefits, not the guilt, but you're receiving the innocence and the righteousness of Jesus. That's being appointed to your account. So if you cry one, then you can't cry the other one to be consistent. You have to go, well, I don't mind that one because I get Jesus's benefits to my account. I'll certainly take that imputation. Adam's guilt and sin nature was imputed, and actually not only in a guilt and an account, but his nature was given to me. In the same way, Jesus's righteousness is going to impute righteousness to my account, and I'm going to get a new body in a real way, just like Jesus's body. So if we cry foul here, we're going to give up salvation. So we go, ooh, I don't want to do that.
it's unfair that we're not getting what we deserve.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Jeff, you were going to say?
I spent some time down at Life Choices office. But what then, if you're dealing with Christians, professing Christians, but they believe that the right to choose the life that the woman's carrying, the baby, then they come back to you and say, well, that was of sin nature, and that baby has to be aborted.
Well, okay, I would say, well, I don't understand what their argument is, because the Bible doesn't say that just because they are guilty of death that we are to do it by our own hands. You know, the flood was something God did. God is the one that solely has the right. I mean, do miscarriages happen?
Yeah.
So when you look at in Exodus 4, God says, hey, aren't I the one that makes blind? Aren't I the one that makes the deaf? Or aren't I the one that brings life and takes people down? So if God in his sovereignty chooses to remove a pregnancy, that's God's, that we call that's in God's hands, right? So God has the right to do it. We don't. But when we take vengeance is the Lord's, not ours, right? So we might recognize that, yeah, even that embryo or that baby at 2 months or 3 months is still a wicked sinner. Doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to be the instrument of God's wrath on that sinner. No way.
vigilante abortion.
Yeah, vigilante abortion. I'm doing God's will. Whoa. If God decides that's his business, he has never put that into the only that God has put into our hands, because I do certainly believe in the death penalty. I don't think it's inconsistent with pro-life, because in Genesis 9, he gives the death penalty to governor. So I don't believe in vigilante death penalty, but if the government is involved, not on a baby, but on a person who has murdered somebody. So as soon as somebody murders somebody, the death penalty for sure is for somebody who murders somebody premeditatedly.
But that's government is involved. I mean, that I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, no, but if it is
difference. I think what Mondo's saying is the difference is the death penalty is a government ordained law for punishment that's for somebody who has taken a life. An infant in the womb has not taken a life.
Yep.
So it's an unjust
hang on,
government. It's an unjust government.
Yeah, doesn't mean what they're doing is right, because that child's there. Bob threw us a wrench in. Go for it.
Well, though, in all reality, I've seen more than one woman in a video where some pro-lifers have showed up and they're doing a protest. Woman's going in to get an abortion, and they say, "This is a picture of the sonogram of my baby. I'm going to now go in and murder it." And they flip the protesters off and they go in. That's first-degree premeditated murder. She's confessing she knows it's a murder.
Yep.
We do have laws from our government saying that that's first-degree murder, because when they know it's a child, they know it's a life, they are murdered. So that's where the government, just because the government's given the protection to murder their children, doesn't mean God certainly is not meant. So we have to understand that when people know what they're doing, it's premeditated murder. I'm sorry. And I would say some women may get deceived. Yeah, it's I'll give everybody else. But when you know it's a child you're killing, it's murder.
Well, that wasn't what I was saying, Bob. I was saying the punishment for the child being aborted is somehow preemptive of their sinful nature down the road. I'm saying that's wrong.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So Genesis 9, when it talks about God instituting the death penalty by humans, by government, he gives it there for murder. Now later in the law, you go out and you pick up sticks on the Sabbath and you get killed. That's a death penalty. I mean, that's a capital case. But that's the law. He's doing that for Israel. But Genesis 9 and the law is, I believe, is over. We've been talking about Galatians is done. But Genesis 9 talking about the death penalty for murderers, premeditated murder, is not done. It's still in existence. It wasn't part of the law. It never was. It was part of humanity given to Noah for all of his descendants, regardless of culture. So to me, if we were to be really consistent, we'd say, well, if you go in and premeditatively abort your child, then you get the death penalty yourself.
Yep.
That would be consistent. You could prove that scripturally. Now, granted, you can go to heaven if you repent, but you're still going to get the death penalty. I mean, that's just the way that would be the rule. And you better get right with your maker, because you're going to be meeting him soon, because you killed someone who was made in his image, right? That's what Genesis 9 says. If a murderer kills somebody, they killed somebody in God's image, therefore they're going to get the death penalty. Via man's blood shall we shed.
So in the millennial reign, would it make sense that the theocracy laws, not the dietary laws, not the sacrificial, laws, because those have been definitely completed by Christ, but a lot of the judicial, theological and from the theocracy, will come back in the millennial reign? Wouldn't that be why would God change how we govern?
Well, interestingly, God is some of the sacrifices come back during the millennium. Ezekiel 40 through 48 in the new temple. And you go, what? Why would they do that? Well, in the same way that the sacrifices in the Old Testament accomplished no forgiveness, what do? They pointed to Jesus. Well, those sacrifices in the millennium in Ezekiel 40 through 48, they don't provide forgiveness, but they point back to Jesus's death on the cross. So that's not a problem. But we also see that the Feast of Tabernacles is going to be brought back into the kingdom, which is one of the feasts. And if the nations don't celebrate it, God's going to send no rain on their nations. Zechariah 14. So it's interesting that some of the laws that he had in the Mosaics, not all of them, are going to be brought back. We just don't know yet. There's not enough information. But we do have at least some sacrificial and the Feast of Tabernacles, as well as, I could say, some of these other ones. Is the Sabbath? We don't know. So God reserves the right to create laws anytime he wants for his particular dispensation, if you want to say that, or his purpose in that time frame. So if he had some prior, remember, we were all once vegetarians. That changed. And then, it got changed as time went on. So we don't know specifically, but I would agree that what is going to be, Jesus is going to rule with a rod of iron. There's going to be no porn shops. There's going to be no Planned Parenthood. I mean, it's going to be a rod of iron, an iron fist for mankind. Not us, because we're going to be in our new bodies, but for those that are being born during the millennium, and they'll be like we are. Okay? So this next phrase, this next section, I do want to talk about. The title is God's ban against Elohim rebel offspring, because what we've been seeing is I kind of recounted a little bit of the history here that the Nephilim died during the flood in Genesis 6 through 9, and we have a period of a couple thousand years of history after the flood until we get really to the time of Abraham and Genesis 14, where Moses is writing that another group of fallen angels came down and started filling the land with Nephilim again, or Rephaim. The word Rephaim in Genesis 14, as well as the Zuzim, the Emim, I have those highlighted. These are all part of the Anakim Nephilim tribes that are hybrids, okay, if you want to say it that way. So, Numbers 13 there on the bottom, this is the first time that they went to spy off the land. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob and Lebo Hamath. When they had gone up into the Negeb, which is the south, Negeb just means south, they came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Shesai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were. It's interesting that these are tribes of Anakim. Well, look at verse 27. I just go down the bottom. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us. They're talking in Bodis. And it certainly does flow with milk and honey. And this is its fruit. Remember they took the thing of grapes? Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. And then go down to the bold. The land to which we have gone and spied out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw are men of great size. There also we saw the Nephilim. The sons of Anak are descendants of the Nephilim, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. So what we're trying to do is establish again that the Exodus has happened, right? So God promises to Moses. They go down to Egypt. God judged all the gods of Egypt. We saw that last time. And now they've been wandering in the wilderness for 38 years. And now after, 40 years total, they're getting ready to go back in, and they went spied it out. And we saw that this is the first time that's caused them to give a bad report. So as they leave Egypt, they do a spy. The Nephilim are there. They lack of faith. God says, that's it. You're going to wander. So now there's another 40-year period until all the people die off. And that allows more time for the Anakim and the hybrids to be put into the lands, even more. So then what we saw was I like to do this little map here. This is the Mediterranean Sea, and then this is Israel, okay? So when they're coming out of Egypt, they come like this, and they come up, and then they cross right there into the middle. And so as they're coming along, there's Nephilim tribes that are around here, especially, I'll do it, so we use red. This was Bashan, remember? Bashan, Og,
King Og. Yeah.
And then up here, what do we have?
14 feet tall.
That's a mountain. What do we have? What mountain is this? Hermon. Hermon. That's how you say it in Hebrew. You got to get down there. And that's going to be important because Hermon is it's the same words in Hebrew, every word is built off 3 letters and there's no consonants. And so I'll just do this. Imagine that as being one sound. Okay. We're going to see this word harrow, which is the word for ban or devoted for destruction. It's interesting that, there's a little N that's put on there, and that makes hermon, which is, people talk about how the words connect to this. Really interesting. But so the rest of that page 2, is what we're seeing is Deuteronomy 1, 2, and 3 are Moses he's writing this down from what's the other place where Moses died? What's the other mountain?
Oh gosh, I been there.
Nebo.
Nebo, I think.
So this is Mount Hermon up here. Okay. And he's at Mount Nebo and he's giving them like, hey guys, let's do a little recounting. Deuteronomy means second law. Okay. In English, anyway. So he's giving them the law again and he's saying, okay. And what he writes in Deuteronomy 1 and 2 is this is what we've been doing so far. Is Deuteronomy 1 through 4. And he's recounting, hey, we went here, right here. Now, Deuteronomy 5, he gives the 10 commandments again. It says, you guys are going to the land. Let me recount to you what happens in Exodus 20 with the 10 commandments. And so here in Deuteronomy 2, he says, then the Lord said to me, do not harass Moab or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land as possession, because I have given Ar to the sons of Lot. The Emim lived there formerly, a people as great, numerous, and as tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also regarded as Rephaim. Remember we said Rephaim is kind of a big, broad word? But the Moabites called them Emim. The Horites were blah, blah, blah. Go on to verse 19. When you come opposite the sons of Ammon, do not harass them nor provoke them, for I will not give you any of their land, because I gave it to Lot. It also regarded as the land of the Rephaim, for Rephaim formerly lived in it, but the Ammonites called them Zamzummim, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim, but the Lord destroyed them from before them. So you go on, and then in Deuteronomy 3, they talk about him being a remnant of the Rephaim. So what you had is, up here is Ammon, you have Edom, and then you have Moab down here. All right. So he says, hey, I'm not giving you in that land. That's Melseer. That belongs to Esau's kids. This is Lot's kids. So I'm not giving you this. I'm giving you this all the way out to the Euphrates River. But what we do know is that there were Rephaim and Nephilim all around here, and God took them all out. That's what the text is saying. Is that, hey, by the way, you didn't need to fight some of these guys because God had used the people of the Esau's descendants to kill them off earlier. But now you're getting ready. You're coming up here into Bashan. This is like this is Rephaim Central, Nephilim Central, right at the base of Mount Hermon, which is what we know from the book of Enoch, chapter 6. This is where, according to Enoch anyway, that it all started. So they come in, they infiltrate this whole area. Were there Nephilim in other parts of the world? Don't know.
You have to assume yes.
And I would assume yes, because I think
There's to look at all the tribes that are named that are full of them.
I think
Rephaim, anyway.
even so, if you look at there is evidence. We'll see that in Joshua it talks about them fleeing over to these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is like the coastal area. This is considered like where Gaza Strip is today. This is the Philistine area. Gath is there. That's where I did my dig. And it's all along the coast. Well, it shows that some of these giants fleed over here. And there is some evidence going all the way, I won't bore you with it, but all the way over to the tip of Africa, the Straits of Hormuz, right? It goes like that. And then it will be a little foot, I think. Okay, there you go. So way over here, bad drawings. But there's evidence of these Phoenician coming all the way here. And then I actually think that they came across to the American continent for a lot of reasons, even to Peru, some of the megalithic structures. I mean, that's a whole different story. But
kind of interesting, just real quick. Yeah, point out the military significance here of how they were driven by God into certain directions. You got the 400 years to 40 years. You see a build up. Plus, you had years prior to that too, during Abram and Jacob's time.
No doubt.
That was taking place in this growth. Anything from the flood
Get on.
after the flood on. So what you got here is they're blocking the way.
Yet they're
They're blocking
Remember,
the way.
we talked about holy ground. God has chosen this to be holy. That's where Abraham offered Isaac, or was attempting to at Jerusalem. So they know this. God had said, "Hey, Abraham. I'm going to give this to all of your descendants." And then what does Satan do? And all the minions,
Building up defenses.
they fill the land full of Nephilim. And God says, "I can't have that. I'm going to annihilate them all. I'm going to devote." The word harem here, you can see there, we'll just move on. Thank you, Mike. That's good. That all of this is being filled down in order to thwart and oppose God's plan of salvation. God has promised he's going to redeem us. And so the goal has always been to thwart that or try. Now here, the Hebrew word harem is a noun that has the idea of being devoted to something. Now, I give you a couple verses, Leviticus 27 and Numbers there. I could say, okay, this cup is going to become hair. I'm going to devote this to the Lord's work, and therefore maybe if we had a temple, I'd bring this over, and I'd devote it to the temple use only. That's why remember when God gave the implements like the copper, the gold, the things, and also the incense. Remember that? What would happen if anybody took the ingredients of the incense and made it for their house? They'd get killed.
Not allowed to do that, yeah.
He'd say, this incense is for the temple only. And if anybody takes the ingredients and makes it, they're going to be cut off. So God had devoted certain things to particular use. The other nuance of the word is this idea of being devoted to destruction. Absolute positive annihilation. And so you see this phrase, and I'll give you some examples here. We know that going down Joshua chapter 6, that God said, okay, when you go into, I want Jericho to be completely wiped out. Now, what we do know is that God's main angle or main purpose to devote something to destruction was to get rid of all the Nephilim and the Rephaim tribes. That's true. That was his main focus. But that wasn't his only focus. And that's why it's important for us to say, were there any, let's just see here, Joshua 6. The city, Jericho, and all that is within it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. This is the word harem there. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall live, because she hid the messengers. But you, keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest what you have devoted them, you have taken them for yourself, you take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. So God has warning them here, don't touch anything in there. I devoted it all to destruction, everything. But we know the story. Remember, Achan takes a little bit, hides it, prayers in his tent. God is mad. And because they're a corporate nation, they go to Ai and they lose. And then Joshua comes back and he's whining and crying. And he's, on his face praying. And God says, get up. Quit praying and solve the problem. The problem is one of the people took something that was devoted to destruction. And it says here, if you take it, you will be devoted to destruction. And that's why you lost the battle at Ai. So then they get Achan together, all his family, and
That's a
balls muff.
for me.
Pardon?
Sorry. Been coming out of Exodus lately and going forward with all that and into Joshua. That's a hard one for me.
What's hard?
Learn this lesson, Joshua, about what I was saying. And I don't know how many died in that battle, but I'm thinking
3,000.
yeah.
I think no, I think that's different. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
I think there was like 30 such or something.
I just have to look at that as really?
They got credit.
Deep and kid it.
Well, the seriousness of being in God's will.
I mean, I understand that, Bob, but the fact is they weren't enlightened prior. It was, is it after the fact?
I mean, if I was to write the story, I mean, I would, the guy out there picking up sticks to warn his family.
Another one got his throat cut.
And to cook food, God says, kill him. He was picking up, he violated the Sabbath. This is where,
It's all about God and the seriousness of what God says.
if God, and
The seriousness of what is.
so it causes me to revere God because God's not obligated to show me mercy at all. If I sin tomorrow and he could take me out and say, I was right. Yeah, you go to heaven, but in this case, Mondo, you violated it, and I don't owe you mercy. I do not owe you mercy. Even as a Christian, you know, and now we're going to get salvation because that's promised, but if he wants to kill thee because I was disobedient, he could do that, and he would be right to do it.
However, he will not be in debt to his creator.
No.
No matter what.
So, here Joshua 6. Here is a non-Nephilim devotion to destruction. So we don't want to say it's all Nephilim only, but there's no doubt that when you look at the history of what's happening in the conquest, and I'll show you this how it's true. In Deuteronomy 3, we're backtracking just a hair because I wanted to show you the language. He's recounting. Oh, what time is it? Used to having my clock up there.
I'm 50.
Okay, let's just read this. Moses is recounting. Now, we turned and went up the way to Bashan, and Og the king of Bashan came out against us, he and all his people, to the battle of Edrei. But the Lord said to me, do not fear him, for I have given him and all his people and his land into your hand, and you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon. So the Lord your God gave into our hand Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people, and we struck him down until he had no survivor left. And we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city that we did not take from them. 60 cities, the whole region of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. All these were cities fortified with high walls, gates, and bars, besides very many unwalled villages. And we devoted them to destruction, as we did to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, devoting to destruction every city, men, women, and children. This is, I mean, at face value, I wouldn't necessarily want to portray this out as being in the Bible.
Well, it sounds terrible unless you understand what
Unless
it
we
was.
see, this is when we throw this information out to the world, humanity in their humanism says, I would never believe in a God like that. You guys are crazy. But yet, what are they missing? What are they lacking?
What these people were.
Wicked people.
Well, yeah.
I mean, and also,
I don't think we can fathom that word either.
his righteousness, what we're ultimately missing is God's holiness. We cannot conceive of God's holiness, that he's right. And again, I look here and go, you have a problem with this? Let me take you to Genesis 6. You really have a problem with God flooding the whole world. But as soon as we put in here women and children, in our humanism, we take offense at that.
Well,
And then we start making God having to submit to our standards. And it's interesting here that even with the flood,
isn't there a spiritual aspect to this too? I mean, we're getting a genetic cleansing going on here, obviously, and we're getting rid of the whole blockade, so to speak.
yes,
But also, if we backtrack when God handed out the nations, right, and then he starts chewing out the other little g gods that he provided these nations, who actually brought worship on themselves.
they did.
All right. So isn't this the other half of it as well? All right. How can you, in other words, we've seen it in our own human history, taking out history so that it can't be repeated or redone.
Yeah,
Well, fact is, though, you can't take out humanism.
we walk away from it.
You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Or shoot down. So these people would be tempted and or do this.
Well, we're going to see that too, because, let's keep going on the next page.
Yeah.
Because Deuteronomy 2, Sihon is down here. So remember, Moses is here recounting them how they came. They got rid of Sihon. They devoted him to destruction. And they're coming up in this whole area. They're going to devote all of them to destruction. But Deuteronomy 2, that Sihon came out against us, he and his people. And the Lord our God gave him over to us, and we defeated him and his sons and all his people. And we captured all his cities at that time and devoted to destruction every city, men, women, and children, no survivors. Okay, it's tough. Okay. Deuteronomy 7. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are now entering to take possession of it and clears away many nations before you, all those nations. Verse 2. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. Here's why. Verse 3. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve these other Elohim. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you and would destroy you. Here's very clearly the anger of the Lord is referenced. Because thus you shall deal with them, you shall break down their altars, dash in pieces their pillars, and chop down their asherim, and burn their carved images with fire. And 26, I've given you two versions there to show you the word van, as some versions will say it. You shall not bring an abominable thing into your house and become devoted to destruction like it. You shall utterly detest it and abhor it, for it is devoted to destruction. So, what we have here is, as Ed Rose said, these people are wicked. Wicked, wicked. Their entire culture is geared over to worshiping false Elohim, false gods. These are the ones that had child sacrifice. They had all kinds of, we get later in Leviticus 18 and Deuteronomy, where they had massive amounts of sexual immorality, bestiality, homosexuality, all these other things that God said, do not participate in all those things, because by doing so, it's interesting, they are polluting the land. It's an abomination. So all these things is just, I would talk about complete animalistic living.
Does that apply, any of it apply to today? Like if you know someone is homosexual, or if you know someone is really in deep sin, drugs and sex and all of that other stuff, if we are not to take them into our home, is that something that we follow today that way, or
The sinner.
I would say this, that here, this is God's holy land, right? Right. This is the holy land. And so there was something specific going on here that these nations, as soon as, again, the flood came, Satan filled it with wickedness of culture, religion, and hybrids in order to pollute the land.
right?
But I would say that those laws that are given to Israel as it relates to land, that land God has never said, hey, in Zephyr Cove, Nevada,
Right.
if there's sin, they're polluting the land.
But
This is special.
I think as a Christian, holy because God died for me, I am not to commune with people.
Or if you were to say, I would say lively in 6, right? Don't be under the yoke. You have Ephesians 5:11 that says, don't be partakers with those who are evil, but expose them, right? And we're to be separate from that. For sure.
You can still say, I love you, even though you're sinning, and you can, come into my house and I give you a hug. Nothing from that past is affecting us today.
Let's say that, we had a family member who was just a flaming homosexual, and he said, Mondo, we want to come over for dinner.
Right.
And they don't claim to be Christian. I wouldn't be opposed. There's nothing spiritual about saying, I can't have you in my house.
Right.
Well, I would think that Christ ate and supped with the sinners, right, and pride too, right, as a light to that. I would say that would be actually an opportunity. Yeah, good thing for you to do to be able to present the gospel.
Come with me to the bar.
Right.
To the homosexual bar. Not going to happen. That's, we just go along pretending that there's no differences of morality and righteousness. No, I can say for sure there's some boundaries there. Mike?
I had to wrestle with this for a long, long time, and the fact that, because we're told be separate, step out, right, and not to associate as such. We're also told not to judge the unbeliever, is already judged, and people that are practicing all that are obviously, they meet sundry. Professor, point is, it's about the new covenant, the new tool, versus using the law in the old covenant. The new tool that we have is love.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's not a lot in our prayer, and they add us that. There's a lot about how far do you go? That's the question.
Or is it? There's a lot about that in Second John. Don't invite good one to your house.
Especially because there is a context of religious, right? So in Second John, it's talking about those who are denying, Jesus come in the flesh and he really is deity and other things. But we know from 1 Corinthians 5 as well, that section, chapter verse 9, where, as a believer, anybody that's named a brother, anybody that says, yeah, I'm a Christian, but I'm a homosexual, it's like, okay, well, now we're going to have trouble, in that regard, or on a overt adulterer or drug user or drunkard. There he says, hey, I didn't mean not to associate with people of the world because you'd have to leave the world. He's really mocking the Corinthians there because they just went extreme. He says, I'm talking about those who claim to be Christians. Not to even eat with such a person because there's a level of accountability. Who are we to judge those on the outside? So there is a perfect balance there.
I was just going to say, just for balances, you want to say there's, and I'm looking for, I can't remember if it's in Romans or if it be Corinthians, but it gives a whole list of stuff and says, thus were some of you before Christ saved.
6-9, yeah.
And so just to, and I deal with that. I have a family member that just came to town and she's not allowed to stay at her house because she can't respect not bringing drones into her house, right? And so I went and met with her at the park and I hung out with her and we had her over for a short visit, but we did not invite her to stay because she brings that spirit that is, I feel it and it's scary.
Yeah, this your kids, especially with kids.
Particularly with children. And so everybody is given wisdom about how they're going to deal with the people. And she professes the name of Jesus, but it's not this Jesus. And you know it. And so it's very interesting that I just crave for wisdom about, and for each of you, whoever you're dealing with in your life, to say, God, how do I love them? And hold my boundary so that I'm not inviting
Also the spirits in, because
right, and we're not superstitious. We know that the spirit's greater than us. Yeah, and that's in the world, and I pray that every day going into the prison. Right, there is evil everywhere, right, and people practicing it, and so you know that Jesus is greater. He'll guide us, but we don't have to invite those things out. Yeah, so
I think the key word there is wisdom. There isn't some hard and fast rule, biblical command for that. I like to look at that, especially as a teacher or pastor, it's like, okay, what rules do we have that are universal to everyone and applies to it's absolute. But there's other things that are subjective, like Romans 14, drinking alcohol, not drinking alcohol. Those are all subjective. But some people feel led, hey, God has told me that I should never have a drink for the rest of my life. Well, God bless you. Awesome. Right. As long as you don't judge anybody else, if God has led you to do that, great. But that's not a universal law for all Christians. And so with wisdom comes along and says, you know what? This is how I feel God is leading us, that we're going to put some boundaries here. And, I would imagine if it was somebody else, you might even have a potentially different opinion. But because so well this situation, I'm going to draw the boundary here. Yeah. So it isn't necessarily hard and fast. Yeah. Each person has to feel led as they pray about it, for sure, in that regard, how they're going to interact with, wickedness.
Hey, I think of my grandson who's with a partner now, and it's like, I love them both. I really do. They're just who they are. But it's like if they ever came out, they could come and stay, but they wouldn't be in the same bed.
Right. I would do the same thing. Hey, we're not going to sleep together in my house or whatever.
Not that it's ever going to happen.
But, if you happen to be one that allowed somebody to stay there and they slept together, is that sin on you? It would be not necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, that's up to you.
That's what's happening in mine.
All right. So, yeah. And that's your prerogative.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, you don't want to condone it. You want
right.
Tribute.
We wanted them to assume that we're condoning it.
Yeah.
Not to get off topic, but to go back, when I think of it, just when I think of Moses talking about in Deuteronomy and in Joshua, and they say women and children, kill everyone, men, women, kill the animals, kill everything. I just think of the, I've personally seen men, women, and children do horribly horrific, atrocious things overseas with some of the stuff I've done. And I can't imagine what it would be like without having the Holy Spirit in the land at the time. And what atrocities beyond atrocities could be. And I can just remember, I'm just sitting there thinking like, though, man, the only way that this thing gets fixed is like everybody has got to go.
Yeah. It wasn't. These weren't all peaceful, loving people. Let's just all sing kumbaya.
Yeah, and
They're wicked.
Here, the example.
It's like when you look into somebody's eyes and they say, like, if I were in the States, I would rape your wife and rape your children and then kill them in front of you.
Yeah.
Like they're looking at you in the eyes and they're telling you that, and
They mean it.
they mean it. This just goes to, like, that's what we can see. I can't even imagine what a holy God's looking down on that and seeing the extent of it.
And he was religious. And we want to say that, look, people can take the Old Testament out of context, right? We're looking at it in context. This is a very unique situation. It's very specific to these 7 nations, right? It said Deuteronomy 7, these 7 nations are mightier, as well as the other Anakim that are in the land. There's going to be a cleansing here. But God didn't say wipe out every nation in the land. Yeah, that's where it's taken out of context, in the sense of we refuse to see it that God was very specific and precision in his commanding them to take out certain cultures who God knew in his full holiness of how wicked they were, and that it needed to be done. It needed to be started over from the foundations. But God's primary instance in what you see in the destruction of these cultures, like Sihon, and we know Og was a Rephaim. These were Rephaim, the Emni, the Zanzumim, they were all down here. God was after these Nephilim tribes to wipe them out. And that's why in Joshua 11 here, Bob, you had something?
Oh, just real quick, applying it to the here and now. You talk about Babylon. You and I were talking about, is Babylon literally a place in Revelation talking about, is it a place or is it symbolic? And if we take the symbolic understanding of it, our country to this day is being polluted with the same ideology that was going on here. And it's gonna. And earlier you mentioned about America is coming down or being taken out, and this ideology of, like, let's example defund the police, which we see in all the democratic cities and states and so on and so forth. If you're not going to bring forth law and justice, you're just opening up. Under the term of social justice,
Lawlessness.
you're bringing lawlessness and you're opening up that freedom, and you've lost the definition of what government is for. It's to wield the sword, the Bible says.
To promote good and punish evil, right? God's good.
So if we allow this in our country, it's the tool that is going to put us right into the same landscape.
And again, you have all the sexual morality. Pretty soon you can marry your dog, be all the laws, the bestiality, it's all back. I mean, this is going to be the U.S. embassy.
Yeah, just a Senate HSQ consent.
We've gone a lot farther than though, and I can appreciate exactly what he said. The U.S., the age of the U.S. We know what God's solution is for that. We have the teaching, objective teaching, and everything. I can't let this go on. Obviously, we have an end. You know what? We need to look at the rest of the world too. It's this, it was the whole world at the time of Noah, and it is now also again the whole world.
Yeah.
You have Australia, you have Eastern, Western Europe, you've got Western Russia, it's everywhere.
Well, let's answer another question. Okay. Wow, this is great. Let's go out and kill all the homosexuals and the adulterers and the bestiality.
Yeah, we'll get rid of all of it that way.
Does the Bible say that?
No.
God gave a very specific instruction at a very specific time through a very specific prophet, never to be repeated again. This certainly isn't New Testament. So what you have some people who say, oh yeah, the Old Testament is no different than the Quran because the Quran expresses killing the infidel. And you go, no, it's very different because nowhere later do you see God going around instructing the Israelites to be his tool to annihilate the rest of the world. It's not true. Very specific here. And in the New Testament, because we're not bound in a theocracy of Israel, right? The Mosaic law is over. Yeah. In the New Testament, you don't see any of this, even hints of it.
You see the opposite. Christ,
If you do,
your enemy, right?
you love your enemy.
Love and pray for your enemy.
If God wants to take the world out, the U.S. out, then that's his prerogative. Yeah, right. That we stand back. God didn't tell me to do that at all.
Well, I just got to chime in. We do have a vote, though.
A vote, for sure.
Issues, and these
Yes.
issues say that we need to determine which candidates or which
We vote for governments that will promote good. That's my article I wrote in the newsletter. Our job is to vote according to promote any sort of policy or platform that would promote good as defined by Scripture, and to punish evil. Now, clearly, some platforms don't do that. Okay, you take it as it is, but we have to recognize that there's no vigilante justice. So people that want to take the militias, right wing, left wing, it doesn't matter. Some of the right wing militias, they're just as evil as the left wing are, because they'll come and say, see. Yeah. They'll quote Leviticus 18. We know how to kill everybody that doesn't believe. They're and whatever. But let's wrap it up here. Joshua 11. Joshua came at that time. We cut off the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua devoted them to destruction. Who? Particularly in this verse, the Anakim, with their cities. There was none of the Anakim left in land of the people of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some remain. So Joshua took the whole land. So these guys, the Anakim there, they fled over to here. Some of them fled to the strip, to the Gaza area, the Philistine area.
Build boats.
Well, and I can so for sure. But in 2 Samuel, so let's go 400 years later to the time with David. You have the last where you have David and Goliath, right? He was in Gath. But you also have in this passage, we won't read it all, except to say on the bottom part, verse 20. There was again war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes, 24 numbered. He was also descended from the giants. And when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down. These 4 were descended from the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. So what you have is the ones that fled over here, hung out for a little while. This is the last reference to giants in the Bible, that David and his tribe killed the rest of them. Any of the other ones fled. And they fled, and there's evidence of giants on like Sardinia, the island there, getting over here to Italy and way over. So when Joshua was writing this, he's saying, by the way, we devoted to destruction those Nephilim, the Rephaim, the Anakim. That was really God's main motive, except there was a set of nations that were so wicked, that were necessarily non-Nephilim, that were so wicked, God said, I want them gone. Including Jericho.
There was still another,
So,
away from his birthright that could writing out the whole thought.
correct. So when we talk about genocide in the Bible, this is the thorough, balanced approach to what we see and what we don't see in that regard. Final comments or thoughts?
This approach was also not having another flood.
Well, that's true too. It was only limited here to the Holy Land. All right, well, let's pray. Father Denver, we thank you that you give us so much in Scripture. If we just take all the pieces and put them together, it does certainly vindicate your holiness and your righteousness, as well as your grace and mercy. And your desire, Lord, was to help the Israelites. Here were your people. And as we said, as you warned them, that those nations would try to corrupt them to worship false gods, some false deities, which would hurt them. And then, of course, you would have to judge them, because no doubt when we worship false things, it's to our detriment. But you're doing that as a blessing by removing these extremely wicked people. We also know, Lord, that, again, your battle against these rebel Nephilim, you're going to win. And you're continuing to bring forth salvation for us, and you were getting rid of our enemies, and that's a very nice thing to do. So we thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay.